My ideology is better than yours. Architect Peter Eisenman once said, "I don't believe that classical architecture is enough to engage people," they say. So what else is new? In modernism, efficiency, utilitarianism, and lack of ornament are prioritized. The perspective during this movement was that architecture could be wielded to destroy issues like homelessness and eliminate inefficiency. The Pruitt-Igoe is a good example of these ideas. With hindsight, all postmodernists, like Peter Eisenman saw, was a failure. Simply put, Pruitt-Igoe could not accomplish what it set out to do. Homelessness did not disappear. In fact, living in the Pruitt-Igoe was dehumanizing and did little to improve lower class of life. Diagram Diaries is written by formalist Peter Eisenman, who enriches the discourse of architecture through deconstructivism. However, he is rather close-minded as he autonomously emphasizes form and the conceptual structure of a building. Peter Eisenman wrote Diagram Diaries in 1999, which showcases his own essays and illustrations, explaining his diagram-based approach to design. His work ranges from his earliest house designs to his current commissions, such as the Memorial for the Victims of the Holocaust in Vienna. Eisenman's approach to formalisms, as shown in Diagram Diaries, has created a new area to explore in architecture. Stefano Corbo argues in his book, From Formalism to Weak Form, that autonomy described the rationalism and the pure efficiency in modern architecture and opened up a new, interesting field for exploration. It allows people to engage freely in discussing the essentials, the form of architecture regardless of social and cultural context. Furthermore, Corbo says, experimenting with new languages and developing the idea of a textual architecture. The process of design was now aimed at proposing multiple readings and denying a univocal interpretation of architecture. Since architectural theory is based heavily on the Western history, Eisenman's emphasis on the form of architecture that is separated from its external elements, such as social context and history, makes the discourse of architecture more inclusive in the way that people from different backgrounds can all engage. However, to others, Eisenman overly focuses on architectural autonomy and disregards architecture's role of creating space and culture. Architectural autonomy holds that architecture is entirely separate from its environment. It is not affected by a zeitgeist or even the site it rests on, and cannot affect the zeitgeist in the same way. In the words of Peter Eisenman, a process that would displace form from its assumed necessary relationships to function, meaning, and aesthetics without at the same time necessarily denying the presence of these conditions. Author Joseph Galuski argues in his article, The Absurd Alibi, that Peter Eisenman's formalist approach to architecture is elitist and self-interested, as well as it has never seemed to deliver on the ambitious goals of exposing latent paradoxes within the tradition of Western metaphysics. Some even wonder, is architecture autonomous at all? Gavor Khartounian writes in his book, Architecture and Spectacle, a Critique. He claims that the demise of ideology dismisses the process of technicality of architecture, a subject that might be considered of critical importance in his own turn to formalism. Essentially, by insisting that architecture is autonomous, he is forced to ignore questions like the effect of advanced technology on architecture, which contradict his claim of total autonomy from the surrounding world and its new innovations.
Furthermore, Peter Eisenman's approach to design, seen in Diagram Diaries, highlights deconstructivism. This movement reanalyzes concepts that had begun to be taken for granted, breaking them down or deconstructing them to a basic diagrammic level. As Eisenman explains in Diagram Diaries, deconstructivism is imagining that the grid itself could move from an analytical tool to a material to be manipulated itself. As Eisenman isolates form and focuses on architectural autonomy, he eliminates the external factors and focuses on decomposition. Peter Eisenman manipulates figure and ground freely and achieves an alternative to the dialectics between form and content. Diagram Diaries introduces the following works. In House 2 in specific, Eisenman reconsiders the basic level of modernist design, Le Corbusier's domino frame. Hartunian writes that House 2 expresses nothing short of the exhaustion of the formalistic energies of the domino frame. By focusing on architecture on a theoretical or conceptual level, Eisenman succeeds at reconsidering established architectural conventions. However, at the same time, he focuses solely on the concept of using a domino frame rather than its actual use. Eisenman creates a sense of autonomy since he does not focus on the domino's function or placement. From a critical viewpoint, this project is rather performative and superficial, as he is not designing on behalf of creating space for the inhabitants. The City of Culture in Galicia, Compostela, Spain, is a series of buildings by Eisenman that really conceptualize the idea of deconstructivism. The 4 buildings that compose this complex are connected by the medieval-like road that flows over each of the structures. Eisenman uses the grid and manipulates it to create the unique curvature that flows over the buildings. Other works by Peter Eisenman that characterizes his ideology of autonomy and deconstructivism are the Eindhoven Railroad Station in the Netherlands and the Yeni Kapı Archaeological Museum and Archo Park in Istanbul, Turkey. The postmodernist style that was booming in the 1990s hasn't disappeared today. It is definitely not as relevant with contemporary architecture becoming more dominant today. However, projects like the City of Culture and the Memorial for the Victims of the Holocaust show that the style is not entirely gone. Diagram Diaries highlights the style of those projects. Peter Eisenman's deconstructive approach to design prioritizes form over people, which may have worked then. But time has evolved people and architecture to become something entirely new. So, does the deconstructive approach used in the past work for the future?